So we have been learning about the life, ministry and message of Jesus Christ, and we were talking about the pre-existent Christ, and then we have been thinking about the incarnation of Jesus Christ, and why incarnation was necessary, and what is the purpose of incarnation, and what are the lessons we are learning from incarnation. Finally, we said, through incarnation, we understand the truths that God is able to save, and also He is willing to save. And incarnation was essential for the perfection of our salvation. That's what we learned in the last session, that salvation, when it is not just a 1 minute thing. In fact, when we accept Jesus as our Savior, the truth is that we are saved as if we have entered into a safe house. Maybe the lion is outside, but when you have entered the door, when you are in and the door is closed and the lion is outside, and the lion can do nothing. Like those who are in Jesus Christ, for them there is no condemnation. So your salvation is assured when you are in. But that is not the end of the story. Again, you are walking towards the glory which is awaiting for us in heaven. And we walk, and this path is known as the path of sanctification. So we are justified by the death of Jesus Christ, and that is like a door. Jesus said, I am the door, and when we enter through the door, you are saved, but still you are walking in the path of sanctification. In each point of this travel or the journey, don't think that we are imperfect. Of course, we are perfect, and we need to be perfect as we are, but at the same time, a perfection is awaiting for us, and finally we need to reach that perfect salvation. This is the process of salvation. I told you, the first one is the positional salvation, and then the process of salvation, and finally glorification, the perfect salvation. Is it okay? See, so what God offers us is the life of Jesus Christ, and what God requires of us is the life of Jesus Christ. And the source of our target, or our target is the source, the life of Jesus Christ, and the source for us to reach that target, it is also the life of Jesus Christ. So now we have learned something about the incarnation, or the need and purpose of incarnation. But now come to the second part of our study, that is the historical Jesus. We have entered into the next session, and that is the historical Jesus. We have seen Jesus as the Alpha and Omega, the pre-existent Christ, the eternal Word who was with God, and He is the cause of all creation. In fact, it is written the firstborn of all creation, but I told you that is not firstborn, because don't think that He is born like we have been born into this world. It's not like that. When we say He is the Son, He represents God, or something like He is revealing God, and that's the reason why Jesus is the Son of God. It's not a genetical birth. Don't consider it as a genetical, like, of course, Jesus was born into this world, and that time, in fact, God was revealing Himself in the flesh. That's all. He's incarnated in the flesh. It was the revelation of God. Okay? It was a revelation of God. So He is the cause of all creation. And the very God incarnated in the flesh and dwelt among us, and that God was Jesus of Nazareth. God. Jesus, when you look at Jesus of Nazareth, you are not seeing somebody other than God, or a man who was pleasing God, or just a man, or just a God. He is, of course, is God Yahweh. Is God Yahweh. You understand? It's the eternal God. But now we see Him as Jesus of Nazareth. So God incarnated, or revealed, or invaded this planet Earth. But it was not, don't think that it was an accident or something happened at a time of history. Of course it happened, but it was not an accidental thing. There was a lot of preparation for the invasion. Preparation from God's side. God's side means, God was preparing the earth, the people, the religion, everything, so that people will understand, or, when He is invading the planet Earth, people should be, accept Him. Accept Him means, He was preparing for that incarnation. Preparing people for that incarnation. So, now in the first session, we are learning about the preparation for incarnation. See, great preparation was there for the incarnation of God into this planet. First of all, God was promising His invasion or incarnation from the very beginning of history. The first preparation is the promises God made to mankind. And we know that the fall of man means fall of Adam, it made the mankind a slave to sin. Earlier he was not a slave to sin, but from Adam onwards, when he fell into sin, he was yielding to temptation. That time onwards, all the mankind has some kind of inclination towards sin. And even when man didn't want to do sin, he was falling into sin, or something like it was a slavery. So God really wanted to redeem man from sin. Redemption was in the mind of God, as we have seen yesterday. It was not after the fall of man God was discussing or deciding or thinking about the redemption, but even before everything was created, even before the ages, He was preparing, or He was doing something. He had something in His mind. The incarnation was not something that God was planning after the fall, but He has planned it even before the ages. Okay, so redemption was essential, and in the Old Testament we see that God is always promising a Messiah to the mankind. God is promising, and also man was expecting a Messiah. So this session we are looking at God's messianic promises and man's messianic expectations. You understand the difference? God's messianic promises and man's messianic expectations. You get me, my friends? So from our part, we were expecting, our forefathers were expecting a Messiah who would redeem them from the enemy. Okay? And God was always promising them that I will send a messenger, I will send a Messiah to redeem you from your sins. The first promise of the Messiah is given in Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. The first messianic promise was given to Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. What was the messianic promise? The seed of the woman shall bruise the heel of the serpent. The head. The seed of the woman shall bruise the head. We will just read that passage. Genesis chapter 3. I'm sorry. Genesis chapter 3 verse 15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise the head, and you shall bruise his heel. The seed of woman shall bruise the head of the serpent, and the serpent shall bruise the heel of the seed of the woman. So the first promise is that the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent. So serpent was their enemy. Okay? So the promise that, God's promise was that her seed would bruise the head of the enemy. And thus, once the head is bruised, then you are free, right? If the head of your enemy is bruised or destroyed, then certainly you are freed. So God wanted to redeem them, free them from the clutches of sin, and them they understood that their enemy was sin. So the first promise of the Messiah was not a political redemption or redeemer, but it was a redeemer who will redeem them from the clutches of serpent who caused sin into this world. Okay? But later we understand that this understanding was not carried out by the Jewish people. The promise was that the seed of woman will bruise the head of the serpent. And this promise, again, God was giving to all the forefathers like Abraham. In chapter 12, Genesis chapter 12, verse 2, I will make you a great nation, a blessed nation. God promises Abraham a blessed nation. Okay? Because he says, Abraham, leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. So God wanted to bless Abraham so that he will be a cause for a blessed nation through the seed. Of course, I will make you a great nation. And now, a promise is pronounced to Abraham, and we see that this promise, that time Abraham was not knowing about Messiah and all. You understand? Many times that's the problem with the Old Testament prophecy and prophets. Even when God speaks about the Messiah, those people might not understand that it says about Messiah. Even, I do not know whether even Adam, when Adam was given a promise that the seed of the woman shall bruise the head of the serpent, she might not or he might not think about what? Messiah is coming and all. It's the same with Abraham. Abraham was given a promise that through his seed, a great nation, a blessed nation. I tell it a blessed nation because then comes the promise of blessing. I will bless you so that you shall be a blessing, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay? So this was a blessed nation. God was promising a blessed nation through his seed. But he thought it is about his own sons born to him through Sarah or somebody else. But in Galatians chapter 3 verse 16, when we read there something that Abraham could not understand, Paul says that when he saith or giving promise to Adam, he saith not, and to his seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. So God was not giving the promise of seeds, but a seed. What does it mean? Paul says it was not about many people, but it says about one seed. One seed. And Paul says it is the Christ. You understand me? Abraham had many sons, but promise is given only to one son. That is Isaac. It says about one person. But even when it was applied for one person, it was also applied for the future Messiah, that is Christ. This is the special thing we need to understand about Old Testament prophecies. Old Testament prophecies, when we hear it, we need to understand that there are you're here? Okay. When the Old Testament prophecies, there is a fulfillment for those days, something is happening, some promise is given, and that happens in that age, and also that happens to the Messiah, and also sometimes that happens to us. So many times there are a three-faceted fulfillment of a prophecy in the Old Testament. Something that is promised to the Old Testament people, that happens to them in their life itself, it is fulfilled. And of course, many times it is fulfilled in the life of the Messiah. And many times it is extended to the eschatological or the last days. You get me? I will tell you an example. See, in Psalms 22, we read about the death of Jesus Christ, or some kind of experience, some kind of feeling that God has abandoned the person. I certainly believe that it was applicable for the person who wrote it, first of all. That person also had the feeling that God abandoned him. Sometimes the problem with us, now when we read a passage, we say it is a messianic passage. But in those days, they did not understand that it is a messianic passage. But that day, they had some kind of fulfillment. Maybe it is not in full, but some kind of fulfillment in that promise God gives to them. And also it is applicable for the Messiah. And it is also applicable for you and me. The psalmist felt that he was abandoned by God. When Jesus was on the cross, he also had the same feeling that he was abandoned by God. And I tell you, sometimes we also will feel that we are abandoned by God. So when we are ascribing a passage for the Messiah, don't think that it is applicable only for the Messiah. You get my point? But it must be fulfilled completely in the life of Messiah, partially in the life of the prophet or the people who are living in his time. You get me? And it is possible that this promise is extended to an age that is the eschatological time or the end times, or even in eternity. Take the case of Sabbath. That's what we see in Hebrews. Those who believe a time for Sabbath is still kept for them. Sabbath or the rest was given to the people of Israel when they reached the land of Canaan. Okay? But that promise is extended to us, and that will be fulfilled in our life only when we reach heaven. So whenever we read an Old Testament prophecy, remember, it is possible, it's not about all the prophecies, it is possible that the promise is fulfilled in their life and in the life of the Messiah, or even in our life. Sometimes it happens in eternity. The promise has a three-faceted, that's the reason why I say it, a three-faceted thing. At the time of the promise, maybe it be fulfilled in their life, in the life of the Messiah, and in the coming time. So Paul says this promise was fulfilled in the life of Abraham, of course. Abraham, God promised him a son, right? A seed. And he experienced, he got a son. He got a son. But Paul says that was not just for Isaac. The promise was not just for Isaac. It was a promise for Messiah also. And that's the reason why he says it is Christ. God says, that's the reason, he saith not, and to his seeds as of many, but as of one, and to thy seed, which is Christ. Which is Christ. Paul says, it is of Christ. It is not just of Isaac. But it fulfilled in the life of Isaac also, right? You understand? This promise was fulfilled in the life of Isaac also, isn't it? Yes. But that was not the end of the story. Even that promise, it was for Isaac and also for Christ. So, the promise in 2000 years ago, God spoke to Abraham about Christ, which Abraham never understood. 2000 years ago, when Paul was giving a promise, 2000 years ago, when God was giving a promise to Abraham, he never thought it is about Christ or Jesus. So many of the promises, the people who heard the promise could not understand what God was promising. But the promise was given. That's the thing. The promise was given to the people. God promised the Messiah who would destroy the enemy and redeem man from his captivity of sin. However, Israel failed to understand the real meaning of the promise. Messiah would destroy the enemy. They understood that Messiah would come to destroy the enemy. But they failed to understand the enemy. That's the problem. The first promise was to Adam and Eve, right? And that time, who was the enemy? It was a serpent. And that's the reason why God said, your seed shall bruise the head of the serpent. And it is the serpent who caused sin in their life. So God was promising that he will send a seed to redeem them from their sins, because they understood that their enemy was sin. But Israelites, when they became a nation, they never thought their enemy was sin, because they were facing many other enemies, material, physical enemies like Philistines. So they thought God would send a Messiah to redeem them from the Philistines. So instead of seeing sin as an enemy, they started seeing the neighboring country as an enemy. You get my point? So all the life of Israel, they were expecting a Messiah who would redeem them from the neighboring country or the hostile country. Even in 1 Samuel chapter 8, 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 1 onwards, we read that they are asking for a king. The Israelites were asking for a king. When Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. And verse 3, yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice, that which Samuel never did. The sons of Samuel appointed them as judges. That itself was a mistake. That is one of the mistakes. Sometimes I feel that this is the mistake most of the mission leaders are also doing. The leaders, the judges, the people should be, appointed by, not by the existing leader, but by God. See, God appointed Samuel. Samuel has seen something happen in the life of Eli, right? Eli appointed his sons as priests. And that was a big mistake. Even after seeing that mistake, Samuel was appointing his sons as the judges. And these people came and said, we were happy with you because you never took bribe from us. You never turned the righteousness. But your sons are not walking in thy ways. So we need, verse 5, behold, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to govern us like the other nations. So what these people say is, if you think humanly, they were asking a very wise thing. And they say the other kings, other nations have a king. So what is the privilege of having a king? When there is a battle, the king will take care of the battle. The problem with Israel, They did not have even an army, a trained army. When an enemy is coming, the Philistines are coming, they are calling, hey Joshua, hey, oh, Moses, oh, Joseph, all of you come, look, the Philistines have come. Yeah? Then there is no arms or nothing. They take the stones and logs of wood and things like that and trying to fight, and they fail sometimes. Many times they did not fail, that's true, but many times they fail. When they failed, they thought it is because they did not have a leader to lead them and in the battle. And that is the reason why they were asking for a king. In chapter 8, verse 20, verse 20, it says that we also may be like the nations, that our king may govern us and go out before us and fight our battles. So they had a reason why they need a king. What was the reason? They needed a king to go before them to fight the battle. So that is very rational and reasonable thing, right? It's a reasonable thing. But I was trying to explain, they always consider the neighboring country as enemies instead of seeing sin as the real enemy. So sometimes Philistines were their enemy. After some time, Syrians were the enemy. After some time, Assyrians were the enemy. Then the Babylon was the enemy. Then again, Syrians were the enemy in 2nd century BC. Then it was Rome. And now at the time of Jesus, they thought the Messiah would come and redeem them from Rome. So all the time they were expecting a Messiah would come and redeem them from, the neighboring countries or the country that was in war, in battle with them. So they failed to understand that the real enemy is sin. See, in 1 Samuel chapter 8, when we read it, they are asking something. What? We need a king like other nations. This is the biggest mistake they made. They wanted to become like others. In fact, God has separated them from all the nations, and always God wanted them to live as separate people, a peculiar people. Even in Exodus, God said, you shall be a peculiar people for me. They were a separated people. They were holy people. Even holy means separated. Holy, sometimes, I told you yesterday that the opposite word for ignorance is not knowledge, it is revelation, right? Likewise, the opposite word for holiness in normal language it is unholiness, but in biblical terms it is common. Means, what is holy? Holy is the thing that is not common. That's all. Suppose you are seeing some oranges in the market, and you want to buy the best oranges for the governor. If you are buying oranges for the governor, suppose 1,000 oranges are there, you will not take any 6 or any 12 or any 20, right? You choose the best. You have chosen the best, and when you choose the best, that is the word which is meant for holiness. You have chosen it. And if there were 1,000 oranges where you are choosing only 20 and 980 oranges are there, it is common and the 20 is holy. The best. It's the same way God has chosen you from the nations. That doesn't mean that all those people are wicked or unholy and things like that, but God has chosen you for himself, separated. That's the meaning of holiness. Holiness and separation is the same meaning in Hebrew and Greek. Separated and holy, it's the same meaning. Separation and holiness, it's the same meaning. So what I'm trying to say, God wanted Israel to be holy, separate. They have nothing to do with the common people, but these people say, the Israelites say, we have a failure that we are not like other people. So we also want to become like other people. This is the biggest problem in church. People are saying we are not like other people. Our music is not like the music that we hear in the disco club. So we will also make it like the disco music. Our singing is not like the people who are singing after taking drugs. So we also will dance like the drug addicts dance. Our people are just selecting a pastor and some people to assist. No, the other organizations do have an election, so we will also have election. We are always looking to become like others. We are trying to become like others. And that's the failure of the church in the 21st century. Let's be a holy people. Let's separate ourselves because we are separated for the Lord. Live like that. I tell you, my friends, many times we have a wrong notion that people are not accepting Jesus because you are not acting like them. That's what in many of the evangelistic teachings or church growth seminar we are asking people, oh, your church should be like them, or you need to project gospel as if it is a political meeting, or you need to approach people as the insurance agents are approaching people. You understand what I say? So we are learning all the techniques of the world to share gospel with others. But what is needed? I tell you, my friends, if you are holy and if you are standing for holiness, then there is no need for any gimmicks in sharing gospel. People will be attracted to you. This is a wrong notion that in these days we say when we are in Rome, we should act like the Romans. No, that is not the biblical principle. When you are in Rome, act like Christ. That is the biblical principle. Even if you are in Rome, act like Christ. So then certainly people will understand you are a separate people, a peculiar people. That is the attraction that is needed. Don't think that if I am playing disco music only then people will be attracted. I'm sorry to say this because I'm seeing it very much in many of the things. My daughter, second daughter, she is only 18 years old. She was telling something very eye-opening. She said, the things that started in spirit ends in flesh and fun. She said, the things that is started in spirit ends in fun. And if you start in fun, where it will end? This is not said by an old man like me. It is said by an 18-year-old girl. Things that we started in, things that we people, maybe, she said, things that is started 20 years ago, 40 years ago in spirit, now it is in fun. And if you start in fun, where it will end? So try to be holy, my people. It is holiness that matters. It is not the outward things or the expressions and techniques or technology and things like that. It is holiness that matters. Okay. Here, the problem with the Israelites, they wanted to become like other nations. And that was the end of the story. And by asking for a king, they were asking God to step down from the throne. That's what we see later in chapter 8, 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 7. And the Lord said to Samuel, hearken to the voice of the people, all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. You know what God says? Samuel was very unhappy to hear that your sons are not walking in your way, so we need a king. So he thought they wanted to replace Samuel. So Samuel was crying before God, oh Lord, I was never a man who after bribes, I was from the very early age, I was ruling over them, and I was always trying to be your representative, your prophet. I did no wrong to them, but now they do not need me. Then God said, It is not you. It is me. They have not rejected you. They have rejected me from ruling over them. They do not want to see that I am ruling them. So they are asking for a king. Why they needed other